Well, let's bring in John Bolton now. I want to say Ambassador John Bolton, Fox News contributor, but he's actually got another job. You hate when people move on, but this is a more exciting job. The National Security Advisor. Ambassador, welcome back.
Glad to be with you. Glad to be back.
It's a day in which this is right up your alley. We'd be talking about you if you were an expert. Now you're part of the dissolving of the Iranian deal that President Obama had in place. What sanctions are now on Iran that weren't there yesterday?
Well, essentially, all of the sanctions that existed before 2015, except those related to oil and various financial transactions. So this really cuts deeply into the heart of Iran's ability to import manufactured goods and that sort of thing. We think the sanctions that went into effect at midnight actually began to have an effect back in May when the president pulled out of the wretched Iran nuclear deal because many businesses around the world didn't want to risk losing business in the United States in order to continue to do business with Iran. So the implications are already pretty profound. They'll grow more profound in November when the oil-related sanctions kick in as well.
Sure. And, of course, the sanctions went into effect at midnight last night. In May, the president pulled us out of the Iran nuke deal, Ambassador. So ultimately, what is the goal of these sanctions? Is it to get Iran to negotiate a new deal, or is it to squeeze the government and squeeze the people so there's a regime change?
Well, we don't, the policy is not regime change, but we definitely want to put maximum pressure on the government. And it's not just to come back to discuss fixing a deal that's basically not fixable, dealing with the nuclear weapons aspect. We want to see a much broader retreat by Iran from their support for international terrorism, their belligerent military activity in the Middle East, and their ballistic missile nuclear-related program. So there's a lot going on here that Iran needs to be held accountable for.
I know that this could worsen our relations with European allies. Will you comment and elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Well, I don't really think it is worsening our relations with our European allies. We've been in constant communication with them. I think in the nearly 4 months I've been here, I've probably spent more time communicating with European allies on the Iran issue than any other single subject. We all still share the same objective of making sure that Iran doesn't get deliverable nuclear weapons. The European governments are still holding to the nuclear deal, but honestly, their businesses are running from it as fast as they can, so that the effect of the American sanctions really is proceeding regardless of the views of the European governments.
China, any sign of cooperating? India, I heard, is upset. They will not cooperate. What are your thoughts?
No, I think the Indian government is cooperating. Look, we've made it clear that our objective, particularly after the November sanctions kick in, is that no one should be buying oil from Iran. And obviously, to do that, you have to find substitute sources. We're working with all the governments involved for that purpose. And I think governments all around the world and businesses should be asking themselves, regardless of the nuclear deal, why do you want to do business with the world's largest financer of international terrorism, really the central bank of international terrorism? Do your shareholders feel good that you're doing business with a terrorist regime?
Yeah.
That's the sort of thing I think everybody needs to ask.
All right. Ambassador, let's switch gears. Last week, there was a show of force. You had all the intel chiefs there in the press room. You were there as well, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, talking about how Russia, even today, apparently, is still meddling in our election process. Given that, it kind of looks like Putin told our president a lie.
Well, he has said on numerous occasions the Russian state is not involved in election meddling. The Justice Department handed down an indictment a few weeks ago naming a dozen GRU officials, one of the Russian intelligence agencies. I don't think there's any question that the Russian state is involved, and that's why the president wanted the four heads of some of the key agencies involved in detecting and preventing foreign election meddling to go out and tell the American people exactly what they're doing. Now, they couldn't tell them everything because obviously you're not going to tell our adversaries what we're doing so they can evade it. But certainly in general terms so that the people could have faith that the government is protecting the integrity of the election process. The president knew what they were going to say because he had been briefed on it a few days before at a National Security Council meeting. He wanted it. He didn't just authorize it. He encouraged it.
So do you think if they try something, we will have retribution for China or Russia or anybody else that tries something? Is that the only thing that will get their attention? Are we prepared to do this?
Well, I can't get into the specifics, but let me say we're considering a variety of steps to take. Obviously, what we'd like to see in place are sufficient structures of deterrence that foreign adversaries don't even think about meddling in our election.
Like what?
Given the situation that we inherited, we're not in that place yet, given what happened in 2016, but we're working on it. And in general terms, what that involves is making sure that Russia and others know that the costs they will bear if they try and meddle in our elections would be significantly greater than whatever costs they impose on us. That's what deterrence is. We don't want conflict in cyberspace. We want our elections to be left alone.
All right, we want to also talk to you about North Korea as well. There's news this morning that North Korea is urging us to drop the sanctions, accusing Washington, accusing the president of acting opposite of that Singapore pledge. Are we close to seeing North Korea denuking? We saw those images last week of them possibly building more missiles. What's the latest there?
Well, it's the performance that we need is from North Korea. The United States has lived up to the Singapore Declaration. It's just North Korea that has not taken the steps we feel are necessary to denuclearize. And the idea that we're going to relax the sanctions just on North Korea's say-so, I think, is something that just isn't under consideration. We're going to continue to apply maximum pressure to North Korea until they denuclearize, just as we are to Iran. The President feels very strongly about it. We've been in consultation with other countries about keeping up the sanctions. We're determined to do it.
So I'm wondering, Ambassador, North Korea is now being the recipient of Russia, is now saying since the nuclear threat is over, and the President indicated that, they're starting to trade more overtly. And the UN says, we're tired of sitting on the sidelines. We're going to flood the zone with humanitarian aid. Is that okay with you?
No, look, we've made it very clear. All of these resources are fungible for North Korea. They have been able to manipulate the international system over the years to get what they need to keep their economy going, even at a very low level, and to keep their ballistic missile and nuclear weapons programs going. We think the maximum pressure campaign that President Trump put in place is what brought Kim Jong-un to the table in the first place, and we're not going to relent until we see progress on denuclearization.
Well, it was great that they did turn over the remains of those Americans from the Korean War conflict. But, Ambassador, you know the story last week from the Washington Post. It sounds like their missile program is still going full tilt. Is it?
Yeah. Look, what a nation that was truly committed to turning the page would do here is return the remains of all the foreign soldiers, South Korean soldiers, Australians, others who were in the UN coalition in the early 1950s, obviously, as well as American soldiers. There's no point in withholding the remains from a conflict that long ago. If they really want peace on the peninsula, as they say, they don't need any negotiations with us to do it. They can do it on their own.
And do you have anything to announce about a second meeting?
No, but as I've said, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is prepared to go back to North Korea to meet with Kim Jong-un. We've proposed that in our most recent letter from the President to Kim Jong-un. The President's prepared to meet at any point. But what we really need is not more rhetoric. What we need is performance from North Korea on denuclearization.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Great
Glad
to
to
see
be
you.
with you.